The 1930s were a great era for non-sports cards. Today we're going to be covering the top 25 most valuable cards from this decade. In here, you're going to have some redemption cards that sell for $10,000 all the way up to $100,000, presidents, and other historical figures. Let's take a look at this list. All right, so let's go over some ground rules before jumping into these top 25 cards. First, I tried limiting the cards to 1 per set. There is going to be some cases where there is 2 per set. Some sets, honestly, most of the cards would have made the top 25, and that's why I made this 2 rule. I'm also probably missing some cards. Listen, non-sports, it's much tougher than your baseball or football or basketball. You have issues all across the world. Documentation sucks. So that's why I'm making these videos. I'm at least making an attempt to define what some of the best cards are on the education side. So if I am missing some cards, please let me know down below in the comment section. That way we all can learn, right? Also, making this list, it probably took me 10 plus hours between refining it, doing the research, and everything like that. If you are new to this channel and you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe, right? Really trying to help grow the non-sports side of the hobby. All right, and if you also want to connect with other non-sports collectors, I have my Facebook group over here, Vintage Non-Sports Card Collectors. We're over 2.5K members right now. Really like the group for education. People also buy, sell, trade. But if you want to learn more about non-sports and connect with other collectors, I highly suggest you join. All right, we are going to start off with this 1930 through 39 R91. There's no public sales of this Abraham Lincoln, and most likely the year on this is between like 32 and 33. The reason why is the FDR card in the set says Our New Deal President, and it also includes the Al Smith, who was the governor of New York and was part of the 1932 Democrat primaries. So that's where I'm kind of getting the dating for this. It's a 25 card set. I think Lincoln would sell the most at auction, but some of the other honorable mentions you would have to bring up George Washington, Lincoln and Washington. They're about the same when they go to auction, although I think Lincoln a little bit outsells it, maybe 10 to 20%. You also have FDR because this is one of the early FDR cards. His 32 caramel is a bit expensive, but this is a tougher card than his caramel. So there could be argument at auction that that card could possibly surpass a Lincoln or Washington. And then also you have Henry Ford. Early auto pioneers, they are quite expensive. And yeah, so any of those 3 are fair honorable mentions. Again, the set is loaded, so there's other names that could possibly take the top spot, but I am putting Lincoln over here. Just to mention also, the total set PSA and SGC pop for this is only 50, so it's very limited. Although I do know of a full set out there that I don't believe has been graded. Up next, we have 1930s Fleer R149 Tylo. I think that's how you pronounce it. A very, very tough issue in the early 1930s. I know it just says 1930. The exact year isn't known, and that's why I'm just going with that in general. Now, here's the Blackbeard card. This sold for $14.76 in 2020, and that's before the Blackbeard market has exploded. Over the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a lot of collectors that have started to go after Blackbeard cards. I wouldn't be surprised if this card today hit 5K plus at auction. And this is one of those sets where I'm going to show you guys 2 cards because we have Blackbeard here that sold for $14.76, but you also have Lindbergh that sold for $28.29 in 2019. Making this the most expensive Lindbergh card to my knowledge. Lindbergh does have stuff in the 1920s that are pretty tough to source, but none have gotten anywhere close to this comp. And that's why I had to show Lindbergh also, right? Lindbergh outsold Blackbeard, but I think in today's market, the Blackbeard outsells the Lindbergh, although they are both the same. Oh, actually, Blackbeard's 1 grade higher. I think Blackbeard would outsell it, just how non-sports has changed over the last few years. But again, total PSA pop on this is going to be 13. I'll just tell you also, there's a gecko in the set that sold for over $1,000 too. So kind of finding any of these cards in the set, guaranteed $1,000 plus. There's an advertisement piece also associated with it, and a full checklist is not known. All right, so 1930 R14 George Washington. This is going to be a 30 card caramel set. All the cards are either labeled with 1, 2, or 3. This SGC4 recently sold for $824. But there's another card in the set that is worth mentioning, the Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull and some of the more famous Native Americans, they have done extremely well the last few years. But unfortunately, there's no sales of the Sitting Bull in the set. So, it almost made this list, but I'm going to put it as the honorable mention behind the George Washington just because we have this established comp. And I believe Washington cards do outsell Sitting Bull, although Sitting Bull has a lot less cards than George Washington. 1931 Will's Walt Disney. This is what I would consider kind of like the Goudy Ruth of non-sports. Just such a popular card. Everyone kind of wants this card. Mid grade, you're looking at not mid grade, but mid grade, you're looking around $500. And the nines have sold pretty consistently between 30 and 40,000. There's 3 sales between 2023 and 2024. I put the dates on here. 37,200 was the most recent comp. There was a comp at 29.7 and then also 40,000. There's 168 at SGC and 637 of these at PSA. Although I do expect that there's quite a few of these still overseas that just haven't been graded, because it isn't a tough card to find by any means. All right, and another card, which some people would equate to the Hannes Wagner of non-sports. This was short printed in the 32 caramel set. And this is one of your biggest sales prices for a non-sports card. SGC 5 did $96,000 10 years ago in 2014. Today, a one is going to clear easily $20,000 plus. Also in this set, you're going to find the George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. And that almost got a slide in itself, because in 32 caramels, there are 3 colors. You have reds, you have blues, and you have oranges. Your blues go for a decent premium, and sometimes the same with oranges, especially with like Washington and Lincoln. Although McKinley is only going to be found in 1 color. 1933 Sea Raiders, another set that we're going to feature 2 cards in here, because you have to put both Pirates Legacy as well as Blackbeard. The Pirates Legacy over here, a 5.5 recently did about $3,500, and it's part of the high series. One thing you'll find out about non-sports in general is a lot of sets, at least in the 1930s, you have like the low series and the high series, and often the high series have short prints that go for a pretty hefty premium. This is the best card in the high series, and a lot of the cards in the set you can find also in multiple different backs between English as well as French. So even in lower grades, this does go for quite a bit of money. And if you guys have watched my monthly series on non-sports cards on eBay, this card often makes the list. I do feel like it's sold quite a bit, although it is pretty low pop. 1933 Sea Raiders, card number 1 is going to be Blackbeard, which is part of the low series, cards 1 through 24. It's not the first Blackbeard card, but it is easily one of the most popular. And just to show you, these are the PSA pops. I didn't mention that on the last slide. Those were all PSA as well. So English back, there's 42. Montreal bilingual, 11. Montreal English only is going to be 17. A PSA 4 is around $1,000 right now. There's been multiple sales in 2024. Some a little bit less, some a little bit more. And the highest sale of this card that I could find was a PSA 7 that sold for $6,600 in 2023. 1933 Tootsie, the Monkeys. This was a 25 card set. For some reason, and this is just the research in non-sports groups and asking a few different people, the Monkeys is the hardest card for people to find to complete the set. The second hardest from research is going to be the Freaks, which is probably the second most popular card in that set. And to give you guys some estimates on comps, there was one recent one that went really, really cheap, so I did exclude it. Sometimes with non-sports stuff slides under the radar, but in 2018, a PSA 6 sold for $611. And in 2019, a PSA 4 sold for $400. All right, a set that I really, really like, but I'm probably not going to own any of these in my collection just because they barely sell. A 1934 Crime It Did Not Pay R37. If you know of Bonnie and Clyde, well, This is one half Clyde Barrow over here. And you can see the description on the back over here. Small time crook until 1930 when he was sentenced for 14 years, right? Killed with Bonnie Parker in 1934 by Texas Rangers. That's so sick. I didn't even know Bonnie and Clyde had cards. I don't think Bonnie is in the set, although the full checklist on the set is unknown. There's been some arguments online. How many cards are in the set? I was going through some non-sports forums. One person said there's 9. One person also says 15, but there's no definitive answer. Also, PSA labels this wrong. They label it as a 1934 set, but there's also another person in the set that talks about 1936 on the back. I don't know how you can have a 34 set if they talk about 1936. Lack of research from the rating companies, unfortunately, on that side of things. This has no public comps, so I have no idea how expensive this is. But we can assume the price of this card based off of another comp. So check this out. Alvin, and I think the last name is Carpus. If I mispronounce it, I apologize. I wasn't familiar with this figure until doing research on the video. This card right here sold in 2004 at REA auctions for $805. 20 years ago, this sold for $800. Man, if you look at N76 prices 20 years ago, they were like pennies compared to where they are today. Just to show you like how expensive this was back in the day. But this guy over here, Alvin Carpus, and I'm probably butchering it, but it was only 4. Let me give you this excerpt that I found from the auction house that sold this. Only 4 public enemies ever given the title of public enemy #1 by the FBI, and he was the only one to be taken alive. The other 3, John Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd, and Babyface Nelson. Now, I've heard those 3 before. For some reason, I've never heard of this guy. But the fact that this sold for $805 in 2004, man, in today's market, I would assume this is a 5K plus card, maybe 3 to 5K. Same with Clyde, at least, right? So that's why I put both of them on here. There probably could be any card in this set. If it went to auction, it would make this top 25 list just based off of this comp in 2004. And kind of just these popular figures, right? There's a lot of different crime sets in the 1930s, and they're pretty popular in general, but a little bit mass produced compared to these. So kind of why I'm also limiting it to 2, right? 1935 R72, I'm going to be a strongman. Another kind of short printed card in the 1930s. This was like a redemption assumed. There's card number 4 in a 25 card set, but there's only been 2 of these graded. Luckily enough, one sold in Heritage in 2024, and it sold slightly under $29,000. So just to give you a description of what they mentioned, some of the other cards in the set would say potential occupations include a boxer, policeman, baseball player, and even a pirate. I wonder if someone would be Blackbeard, right? Very, very strong price. And you can see also there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different holes in this card. I didn't look up the other card, but I assume it's going to be the same way. All right. I kind of cheated with these 1935 R89s and R90s. So I wanted to show 3 cards in this, and I'm splitting them up, right? So I'm going to show you one R89, I'm going to show you one O-Pee-Chee, and then also one R90. So we're going to start with the R89. You can find these in both type 1 and also type 2. Type 1 answers the question on the other side of the card. So like you can see the question, can you answer it right? Type 2 answers the question on a different card, and that's how you differentiate type 1 versus type 2. I only looked at type 1 comps. So PSA type 1s of Let's Make a Hoopy, $300 to $400 for a PSA 1. A PSA 3.5 sold for $1,200 in 2023. This is also O-Pee-Chee, right? So they printed these in Canada. And this was the other card I wanted to feature, card number 21. You have Walt drawing Mickey Mouse over here. He's sure a handyman around the mouse. And SGC 2.5 sold for $850. And another SGC 5 sold for $708. These I also believe were featured in my non-sports videos for eBay. At least the 2.5 was. And the other card I wanted to show you guys was card number 120, which was the last one in the set. Now, for some reason, there is a R90 designation on this. I assume the last, cards in the set were short printed, but I'm not sure why it got a different designation by Burdick. This features Laurel and Hardy. They were a famous comedic duo. Fun enough, they were in the 1931 Will set also with Walt Disney, although they go for a fraction of the price, so that's why they didn't make this video. A PSA 1 of this card sold for $620 in the 2024 vintage non-sports auction. But just to show you like how strong this card was, even in 2013, a PSA 2 sold for 200. This is not an easy card to find by any means like that. And you kind of have three iconic figures of the early 1930s. 1935 R36 Fleer. So I wasn't super familiar with the set. I've heard about these and I didn't know how expensive they were. I've seen these perforated before and they're not too expensive on that side of things. But I was talking to one non-sports collector that knows a ton in our Facebook group. And he mentioned that any card with the tab and the gum sleeve, as shown with these three over here, is over $1,000. Now, I couldn't really define a specific card, so I assume either like card number 1 or card 35 would be the most expensive in the set, right? Card first or last. But the set has 5 cops and 30 robbers. They're all fictional. So it's kind of like saying who would be the most expensive out of fictional characters, right? First or last card, unless something was short printed, which I don't know. But either way, the price went at $1,000 each. Yeah, that has to make the list. All right, 1936 Heinz Skybirds. So there was a few different aviators that were pulled from the Heinz Skybirds release. That's why you'll see some of these as Series 1 and then also Series 2. And you can see on Amelia Earhart, it says first series. Now, Amelia Earhart is going to be the biggest name, right, of the ones that were pulled. You have Laura Ingalls, you have Howard Hughes, you have Edwin Musick, and then Frank Hawks. And those were the ones that are pulled that are considered short prints. They're all expensive, and that's why they all got defined over here. But just to show you Earhart comps, a PSA 2 sold for $515, whereas a PSA 4 sold for $2,040. So there'll be people asking, like, where's the Skybirds? This Earhart made it over. The Skybirds is going to be an honorable mention at the very end of this video. Got very close to adding it into this video, but it just did not sell enough. 1936 Strange True Stories R144 The Batman. This predates the Batman comics, which I wasn't super familiar with this card. I've seen it once or twice, but this is also the last card in the set. And on the set shows different weird stories on cards. So this is an example, right, showing the Batman. I wonder if this ever did influence those comics. Either way, a PSA 1 sold for $4,300 in 2023. The highest sale of this card I could find is a 1.5 that sold for $7,000 in a 2021 Leland's auction. I wonder what this 4 would do if it went to auction. 1937 Wild West Cowboy Outfit. Now, this is another redemption card. So you could redeem to get this whole outfit that you see on this card over here if you completed the set. Now, how the company defined the set was either cards 1 through 25 or numbers 25 through 49. You get everything shown. Now, a PSA 3 in 2019 sold for $2,000, and then a PSA 6 sold in 2012 for $11,352. 1930 through 37 R115 Jigsaw. You have the Lincoln over here. This is a 14 card set, which features Lincoln through Coolidge and are numbered 16 through 30, with Cleveland numbered 22 and 24. There's a lot of discrepancies on the set, right? So CGC labels this set as a 1937 release. PSA labels it as a 1933 release. There's a limited amount of comps on these. I know I've seen a few of these sold in our non-sports group, but just from public comps. And Andrew Johnson 2.5 sold for $111 in 2019. And Andrew Johnson is no Abraham Lincoln. This was kind of a oddball that I threw in here. Just for full reference also, this is a card in my collection. So this is 1937 Editorial Bruguera. I probably mispronounced it, of John Wayne. John Wayne doesn't have a ton of cards in the 1930s, and he is a legendary actor, right, on the Western side of things. And some of the actor cards over the last few years have gone up quite a bit, especially some of the bigger names. And being that there's few John Wayne cards out there, especially ones that look decent, I decided to throw this in here. Also, the reasoning behind it, I've seen a few of these cards sell before for $100 plus. Recently, there was a Josephina Baker. It shouldn't be say Bakes. That PSA 2 sold for $400. I would assume John Wayne's a bigger name than her. And I paid up a few years ago for this card, paying, I think it was like $200 or $250. So these are very tough to find. Most have under 3 pops. It's a foreign issue out of Spain. If I was going to give an honorable mention to the set, I'd probably say Johnny Weissmuller would sell really well, just based off of Tarzan and then also his Olympics career. So if you do have the Weissmuller, I would be interested on that one. There's going to be 2 cards from Horrors of War. This is card number 240 over here. PSA 2.5 sold for $410, with a PSA 8 selling for $1,200 in 2019. The PSA Pops 119. Also, I only gave 1 honorable mention for Horrors of War. Probably should have thrown a few, but I put Marco Polo Bridge for card number 1. I think this is one of your iconic images from the 1930s. Another one over here is 283. Obviously, I had cut out sections of this card for reasons. The SGC4 sold for about $1,000, with a PSA 8 in 2020 selling for $36.01, PSA Pop of $150. We're jumping into another war set, right? And one of the things that defines the late 1930s is there is a bunch of different types of war sets out there. This is 1939 War News Pictures. And this is considered the Dirty Dozen, which I realize I don't even have on the slide. I should have put that over here. There's 12 cards at the very end of the set, which are considered Dirty Dozen. And they are very tough. It's like 109 through 120. The full set of 12 sold at auction for $37.37. And someone put recently some SGC Authentics on eBay, and they've been selling between $200 and $300 a piece. And those are just Authentics. So pretty expensive for any of these cards within the Dirty Dozen. Another Film Star set, because I did want to put a few of them in here. I saw these 1939 R92 gum makers photo chewing gum movie stars. Something I'm not familiar with. I'm no means expert on movie cards. But Tyrone Power and then Don Amachi, don't know how to pronounce that. They both sold for $550 in a 2020 vintage non-sports auction. There are some bigger names in the set, right? You have Errol Flynn, you have Betty Davis, and Bing Crosby, which I would assume would outsell those, which is why it definitely needs to be on here. Out of those 3, I'm not sure who would get the top spot. I mean, it really just depends who wants the card, if they all were featured in an auction on the same day. But yeah, so if I had an image, I would put it right here, but I don't have the image of any of those 3. So you get Don on the side of things. All right, so here's a few of my honorable mentions, and these are going to be from sets not featured in the video. 1933 through 39 Indian Gum. I wanted to feature one card at least from the set, so I put Billy the Kid. It seems Billy the Kid is one of the most expensive in the set. Chickle Skybirds, put Amelia Earhart. G-Men and Heroes, you would put S's Disciple. 1936 Topolino Mickey Mouse, put card number 1. 1937 Ripley's Believe It or Not. The last 24 cards in the set are short prints, so any of those could technically go on here. They're very, very tough to find. Originally when I made this video, I put card number 48 on there, which was the last card in the set, but it just barely missed the cut. And then in 1939 Bridgewater, Ronald Reagan. These have gone down a lot. There's a ton of them out there, but they do still command a decent premium. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, it took a ton of effort to make, so if you do appreciate these and you're new here, make sure to subscribe. And if you want to help support the channel, put you at the very end of these videos as a channel member. And again, thanks for checking this out. Let me know what you guys want to see in future top 25s. I'm going to try to do every single decade of non-sports, but it's going to be a lot of work. So you'll see some posts in the non-sports group. All right, I'll see you guys later.